Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be looking at why I art journal, and one of the reasons I art journal is I like to represent my thoughts. So I had a bit of an idea before I started this page of what I wanted to do. This is a beautiful image from Scrap FX, a collage rice paper with the gorgeous colours on it. So I've fussy cut it out and stuck it into my Delusions journal. And before I started the video, because no one needs to see this, I actually went through a set of Dina Wakley collage tissues that had all these writings of quotes and phrases and so on them, and just cut them into strips. So I used my little paper trimmer to do it, and it took a little while. Hence why I did it before I turned on my video, because yeah, as I said, you don't need to see it. But I am just going in layer by layer and gluing them down. Now, because they are so fine, I am actually able to manipulate them a little bit and sort of bend them where I want to create hair. The reason I wanted to do this is because I don't know, well, it's not just me, obviously, because I know lots of people do this, because I've talked about it before and you've all told me that a lot of you do this too. But I am a chronic overthinker. I will, trying to switch off my head is really, really hard. It's one of the reasons I do art, because as you can see in the background, I've got my iPad playing. It's usually something I've watched before, so I tune out just listening to that, and I just work. I just do. So I try not to think very much when I do this. I work quite fast, and one of the reasons I do that is because if I'm working fast and making decisions fast, I've got less time for my brain to be talking to me. So there's method in my madness. But quite often, I don't know if it's a teacher thing, a women thing, or just people like me thing, but there'll just be a constant narrative going in my head of random stuff. Oh, you need to do this, or why don't you do this next time you teach that lesson, or I need to do this when I teach this kid, or so and so needs this done, and oh, you haven't done this and you haven't done that, or you could do this better, or this is what the next thing. It's just constant. So trying to find some stuff to switch that off is really, really important to me, because it's exhausting at times. There's a constant, for someone who is pretty introverted, having that constant narrative running in my head. It's like, no, I just want silence. I don't want to think anymore. So that's what this page is all about. And I suppose by doing this and visually representing what it is like in my head, I was actually finding it very cathartic. Especially the overlaying of the words. I was sort of worried that, this won't make sense because you've got all this stuff overlaid on top of each other, but that's exactly like how it is. So in actual fact, it's kind of made sense. You can see that I sort of had funny hair sort of sticking straight up, but it wasn't necessarily working. So I was going back in and moving those strands. Now, one of the things I like about the gel medium that I use, the Dina Wakley gel medium, is while it sticks really, really well, I've never had a problem with it, it has about a 5-minute, 10-minute window that you can kind of still move it. So it's stuck down, it's not going to go anywhere. But you can see I was able to remove it without actually hurting or harming the page. I didn't tear off any papers from it, which I find really, really handy, especially if I do decide to change something at the last minute. I was able to sort of change the hair with it. I found when I was doing this, and for anyone who does do hair, I'm not necessarily a person who can actually draw hair, but it was bothering me slightly. It wasn't necessarily the correct shape, but again, I was working within the limits that I had with what I was doing, so I was a little bit forgiving with myself, and I could kind of go in like I'm doing now and sort of paint over a shape a little bit and have those other bits as flyaway hair. Because the bottom was so busy, I wanted to put a little bit of a background in. And this probably wasn't necessarily the best background in the fact that that's quite busy as well. But I sort of wanted to pick up a little bit of a tonal colour from the image itself. So it had those little shades of pink, and it had this sort of blue colour in it, so I just wanted to really boost the blue colour. So I'm using some marine gloss spray. The reason I'm using the gloss spray is because it is a very translucent colour, so I could sort of build up the layers somewhat. When I'd done that, I then wanted to go in with some of the blushing to sort of balance it out a little bit. Now, I'm not necessarily sure if I did this again I would do that, but you know, it was me trying not to think too much and just doing. With most of my images, for those people who follow my channel know that I always go in and touch up the eyes a little bit just to really pop them out, make them the focal image. I am putting in a little bit of highlighting. The big blob of white you could see was actually a mistake. I didn't mean to do that, so I used what I had and spread it out around the page. It did actually kill out some of that heavy blue that I had in there, which I was actually quite appreciative of in the end, but it did make her look like she had a funny chin, so just be careful with what you do. I'm also going in with my Stabilo Oil pencil just to add in a few extra hairlines. Again, I'm not sure if that was necessary or not. Probably not. Probably made it look a little bit more cartoony than I wanted it to, but again, it gave a little bit of definition to the fact that, you know, yes, they're words, but they're in the background. One of the things I suppose I wanted to do was make sure that while the words could be read, obviously, again, a bit like being in your head, they're there, but you know, people don't necessarily know what the dialogue is going in your head. I did pull out my silver gloss spray as well and painted over it. So the silver on black obviously is very silver, but on lighter colours or over the top of colours, it gives almost a pearlescent finish, which I really liked, and it did actually help to dull down that background a little bit. Finally, I decided to put my quote on the page. So if only thoughts had an off switch, which was basically what I was thinking the whole time I was doing this, because as I said to you, you know, while I was doing this, because I was doing it on the topic I was doing it on. Usually when I'm doing something like this, my head does switch off somewhat, but because I was doing it particularly on this sort of topic of overthinking, because it's obviously been a running theme in my life recently, I did actually have an awful lot of thoughts going through my head. So this one kept coming up, you know, I wish you could just turn it off. I wish you could just turn it off, because before I'd done this page, I'd had a few sleepless nights with having to get out of bed and actually just write down what was going in my head, because a lot of it was around school and planning and having ideas and, oh, I could do this and I could do that. So I find it difficult to switch those off, because quite often I think, oh, it is actually a really good idea, and if I don't go and write it down, I'll actually forget it. So life of a teacher, life of lots of people, I'm sure, but there you go. So going in finally and putting a bit of a drop shadow in with my white, or highlight, sorry, with my white pen, just to sort of pull it out a little bit from the background, which seems a little bit redundant in the fact that it was black and it was very, very in your face anyway, but it kind of helps tie it into the page a little bit more. So here you can see that overlaying of those thoughts, of those strips of paper. Now you could certainly do this if you didn't have those collage strips. It's not necessarily going to be translucent, but you could certainly type something up on your computer and cut it into strips and do something similar, maybe tint it over the top with some paint. And stick it over a magazine image. So it's just a different way of using text, I suppose, in your page to represent what's going on in your mind. So have a go with it. It's a pretty easy process to do, and as I said at the beginning, it's how I represent what's happening in my head, which I find really important to do on my art journal. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye for now.